Welcome to the Opportunity Podcast, where entrepreneurs come to learn from real buyers, sellers, and industry experts on the lesser-known growth opportunities to build their online business empires. We'll uncover tactics veteran online business entrepreneurs have used to build, buy, flip, and sell their way towards personal wealth. Sit back, grab a coffee, and get ready to uncover hidden growth secrets. The Opportunity Podcast starts now.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Opportunity Podcast, your go-to resource for hitting growth opportunities throughout online business. For those familiar or new to the podcast, I'm Sarah, and thanks for joining me today. In this episode, I'm joined by Perrin Carrel, an SEO whiz and the co-founder of Rank.io, a boutique SEO agency that offers a holistic approach to boosting organic traffic. I think you're going to love this episode because Perrin is an excellent storyteller. He walks us through his epic SEO journey from the wild days of PBNs and learning from the challenges of using them to building his first super site in the pet niche and its eventual successful exit. We also talk about his personal exit strategies and what it means to really provide value with your content. Perrin also gets into what's what in SEO and takes a stand on what he thinks is great advice and what he thinks is completely outdated. So whether you're new to SEO or a veteran in the field, this episode is jam-packed full of helpful hacks and interesting insights. Let's get started. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Opportunity Podcast. I'm really excited to have today's guest on, Perrin Carrel of Rank.io. So Perrin, how you doing today?
Sarah, we did it.
We've done it.
are finally here. You know, like this is always kind of like the intro spot for the audience. I think it's worth understanding just the insanity between the first time we recorded the podcast and the second time. I mean, like no details, but I had to change an office, change computers, change a microphone. Sarah changed countries for us to do the podcast. So, but we're doing it. We're here.
We did it. We had some technical difficulties. And I mean, I've got to give Perrin the biggest shout out ever because he was so gracious. I mean, I was sweating. This is like, a podcast host's worst nightmare. Like, oh God, all these technical difficulties. This person's going to kill me. And Perrin is honestly, I think, my new favorite person in the industry. He is lovely. So the fact that he came back after all this, huge testament to Perrin being a great person.
Yeah, we're all friends here, but I'm excited to be on. Of course, I know some of the team over there and have known y'all for a long time. So I'm pumped to be here and pumped to chat.
Awesome. Yeah. And we're excited to have you on. I know when you kind of first came on the scene for the podcast, Greg was super pumped because he's like, I love Perrin. I love his writing. And when I started researching you, everything that you wrote online, especially your own story, I was just like, this is awesome. One, I wish I could write like my own narrative the way Perrin did. It's like beautifully done, funny, really informative. But yeah, so goals. But like, let's start with that then. I mean, you've got this amazing story. You've got it written out beautifully online, but I think you wrote it a while back. So there's probably been some updates since then. So walk me through how you got into the crazy world of SEO.
Yeah, really it was, first of all, thank you for the kind words. I appreciate it. Yeah, really it was a lot about finding myself more than anything. It was a lot of job hopping, so the very condensed version of like my 20s is I graduated from college, tried to go to grad school, hated it, ended up moving back home, worked a couple of different things for a while, and then moved to Chicago in 2008, which was like in the middle of the recession. So I had to job hop a bunch again, ended up going to grad school for poetry of all things. After that, I got a consulting gig. So I'm like truly all over the place, like trying to find myself. I mean, young Perrin knew that like I could write and I needed to do something with words, but I didn't really understand what I wanted to do. And I landed up in a cubicle at a huge consulting firm that, was like a big global consulting firm. And I was super excited, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed for like 3 months. And then I was like, oh man, I cannot do this. I had the experience that I think a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of digital nomads, a lot of online marketers who start independently have, which is just like, I don't like this corporate grind. I don't like dressing business casual. I don't like having, like 17 bosses and like, working in these corporate politics. I needed a little bit more freedom. So truly the first step for me, and this is probably funny to a lot of people, or maybe it's just how we all start. I Googled how to make money online and, read a bunch of stuff, or obviously read a bunch of misinformation, but I landed on Spencer Hawes's blog. Spencer Hawes is probably someone a lot of your audience knows. He's from Niche Pursuits. He's old school. He's an OG, great guy. We're still friends. And I won a contest that he was having where he helped someone build a niche site. And so he helped me build this niche site and it did really well. And then he offered me a job working with him for a while, which got me out of the corporate sphere altogether. And, I had kind of like this site that I'd built with him that was making like $4,000 a month or something. And then I was working with Spencer and that kind of kicked off a chain of events. And I've been in SEO ever since, jumping around to different places. Since then, I've built 5 sites of my own, sold 4 of them. I've worked at different places around the industry, including Niche Pursuits and Authority Hacker, which is probably, if you have heard of me, it's probably kind of where you've come across me before. And after I sold my last site, I decided I wanted to try, quote unquote, real business and started an agency. And that agency has been alive for 4 years now, growing steadily. And we've been working with some cool companies.
That's awesome. It's funny hearing you talk about like the grind of that cubicle life. I just watched Office Space again recently. I hadn't seen it in like, I don't know, 15 or more years.
Yeah.
And it was so interesting now watching it as like 30-something-year-old and being like, oh, wow. It just resonates on an entirely different level. And I think in light of what you were saying, like people having that reckoning, or I guess we call it, we're in the midst of it now, the great resignation of there's got to be more, there's got to be something different to this. And what do you do? I'm so glad that you kind of throughout that journey, like you were able to find a place where you could harness all that talent that you have with writing and words and actually become like on the other side of the making money online, starting from the Google search to you did it.
Right.
You are the person getting searched now.
By the way, it was weird to do in 2012, right? Like,
yeah.
It wasn't like, the gig economy really hadn't arrived yet. And the people who were doing SEO were doing it very differently and it had a way worse reputation. So it was a strange leap to make for sure. And a lot of the people close to me thought I was nuts to stop working at a big global consultancy and start building websites. But the people in the world were great. And I thought the things they were doing were really cool. And yeah, I'm happy I did it, of course, because now I'm here.
Yeah, I guess I hadn't really thought about it in that sense. Like, I mean, we know the industry is constantly changing, but yeah, when you're talking about like 2012 or something, that's just a completely different landscape. Goodness, it must have been really brave to have to make that leap, especially in light of everyone going, what the hell is SEO? Like, what are you doing online?
Yeah, it was the Wild West for sure. And it's one of the things that drew me to Spencer Hawes. Actually, shout out to Spencer Hawes. We're still buds. We probably don't talk as much as we should, but when we do talk, I always enjoy it. And he was doing stuff in a really smart, cool way instead of starting like the next Cialis site or whatever, which is kind of what lots of SEOs were doing back then. So it was a Wild West. It was a different time. It was an interesting time to cut my teeth because I made a lot of mistakes with that first website I built. The first one that made money. I tried a bunch of other sites before I ever built that one with Spencer. But yeah, I mean, even then, things have changed a lot since 2012 when I built the first site that actually made money.
Yeah, well, I wanted to talk to you about that. I know that you've had different sites, you've had quite the journey. I know it's probably hard to distill some of the individual lessons you learned along the way, but me being a mean podcast host, I'm going to try to make you do it anyway. So talk to me about that first site. Yeah, I know you've had different ones. I understand that you had a shaving site. It was making $4,000 per month, and then a Google algorithm brought it crashing down, as we know Google algorithms are apt to do. Talk to me about what happened here and the lessons you learned from that experience.
Yeah, so this was 2014. Started learning in 2012, 2014, I think is where I was able to really get this thing off the ground. It was the site where I made probably all of the mistakes. This is the site where like I didn't understand SEO. And I didn't understand necessarily how to play nicely with Google. And I didn't particularly understand the relationship between the success of a site and the happiness of the person consuming the content, which is, a focus that I've had for a long time now. But with this site, I was really just learning the mechanics of what site building was, what SEO was, how things work. And because it's so difficult to find real information now for sure, especially back then, even for people like Spencer Hawes, we were doing a lot of things really differently. First of all, the content was all about products. An affiliate site, it was called thepennyshave.com. It was about razors and shaving. Not something I cared about. I hadn't used a straight razor in my life and I was writing about it, right? Which is, I think, kind of a mistake in its own right, an area of improvement for a lot of site builders. In addition to that, I was like looking at software to build links and like trying to like leave comments on blogs to build links and just doing like directory spam. The big one, of course, that got us slapped was using PBNs. So PBNs, like if you Google my name in link building, you will see me fighting it out with black hats and quote unquote gray hats kind of wherever I can, although I haven't written in a long time. The reason is I had a really traumatic experience because of PBNs. With this site, we were not only using PBNs, which is a private blog network, essentially creating your own links instead of other people choosing to link to you, which is what Google wants. And we're not only using these sites, which is against Google's terms of service, but we were writing about it. We were using a public network and we were like advertising for them in the case studies. So everybody on that network got manual penalties from Google. And, we tried a bunch of stuff to recover and disavowed all the links and had them removed and did a bunch of other stuff, but it never recovered. And of course, that's a lesson in SEO. But for me, I thought I was on a path where I was like, okay, like this site, I'm really proud of it. I can just do another one, an X niche. And like, I had kind of like in my head built this future for myself where I was just going to be building these niche sites. And I felt like I was good at it and it was kind of cake. And this dream that I had for myself that was based on these niche sites kind of came crashing down because I had made a dumb mistake that I really didn't even understand was a mistake. At the time, if you go look at the case study, it's called Niche Site Project 2. It's probably archived somewhere or might still be published on Spencer's site. I was like defending PBNs, I was like advocating for PBNs. And unfortunately, it took this experience to kind of change my mind. But the experience of like having a significant chunk of your income, it was like 60% of my income at the time, just be removed overnight and you wake up and, you have bills to pay and stuff. It was a very difficult time emotionally for sure. And it really shaped the way not only I do SEO, but the way I approach business. And so, yeah, it was super tough, but I learned a lot. And the next sites were a lot easier, a lot smoother, and I built them a lot differently.
I have a ton of thoughts on my mind as you say that. One, just recognizing, I can't imagine what, rug being pulled out from underneath you, what that must have been like, especially after like going through the grind of leaving the safe corporate job and having people doubt you, like, what in the world are you doing online? It's like, no, I am doing anything online. Look, I am earning online. It's going great, guys. And then boom, complete shift overnight was probably not the easiest thing to bounce back from. I guess one thing that came to my mind as you're talking about it was like, just how long did it take you to maybe recover? And, were you just in an immediate hustle after that to try to fix? Was there like a down period of like, I need to feel through this in a way? Or was it just maybe even a cloud at that time?
Yeah, that's a really good question. It was not only tough because I lost that site, but I was working with Spencer. And my job with Spencer was to be building niche sites. And every niche site we're using at the time was using PBNs from this network, or I think almost everyone. So if you read Spencer's blog post from right after that, it's one of his most popular blog posts. I can't remember the exact title, but it begins with, "Okay, Google, you win." And so, not only did my site stop making money, but I had to like Skype Spencer and be like, do I still have a job today? It was like Armageddon. And there was, of course, that social pressure that you mentioned. Like, I had spent the last couple of years convincing people I'm not crazy for trying to go build a site about shaving because it really can make money. And then now I have to explain to a lot of those same people, like, no, this doesn't work. By the way, my job might be in jeopardy because none of the sites made it through. So it was super duper tough. And I can't remember really how long it took us to recover. Spencer was a champ. He kept me employed and came to the table the next day with ideas and instead of, tears. And that's something I always kind of thank Spencer for sure. And we ended up building some cool, moderately successful sites before I ended up moving on. And probably between that shaving site and the next site I created, which was called herepup.com, and it was about dog stuff, it might have even been like 18 months or something. I mean, it was a long time. I was like pretty wrecked from that. So yeah, at least a year.
No, I mean, I can only imagine. I'd actually feel like, a year is pretty good to go through all that and bounce back and start getting on your feet again. Like, kudos to you. I wanted to ask you about that because I think not enough people, they really get to share the nitty gritty of what would have been a very difficult but formative experience and help set you up on the right path. Because that was one of my questions for you. You had mentioned like going to bat with these black hats and gray hats. And I wasn't sure if you still feel like you're going to bat against those people and trying to fight against things in SEO that you feel like are outdated or risky, or do you feel like most people nowadays are kind of on the white hat train and there's not really anything to fight against anymore?
Yeah, it's kind of funny because when I was in the affiliate marketing world, yes, all the time. People are using PBNs, people are cutting corners, people are writing about products that they don't know about or hiring people to write about products. Content quality is questionable. Scholarship links, which we might talk about here in a little bit when we're talking about link tactics, like that was a whole big dramatic thing. And I was always arguing with independent site builders about things I thought were unethical, not because they're against Google's terms of service, but because people depend on you for most of us, or with the income. And I think it's kind of a strange game to play if you've got like a family, but also because, if you're building a site, you're making product recommendations, that affects other people's money and that affects other people's life. And there's kind of a basic level of honesty that felt like I was always arguing for. And when I was in the affiliate marketing world, I was definitely having those conversations all the time. And the people who I ended up being close to were doing it in the way that I agreed with. Not to say either way is right or wrong. I understand the business case for a lot of the other types or the other methods of doing it. But the people I ended up getting closest with and respecting the most were the people who were kind of taking a business-like approach to affiliate marketing and kind of building for longevity, which means in most cases, building with the user in mind, building it as a business. And that's, just give a couple shout outs. People like Mark Jenner, people like Kevin, I'm going to butcher his last name, Kevin Espiritu, who actually just raised a funding round for his gardening site. So there are a lot of people out there who I thought did it the right way. And I was always having conversations arguing against people I thought were doing it in questionable ways. That said, after I started the agency, those conversations disappeared for me because I was talking to businesses, and businesses are constantly concerned with risk. So when we're talking to founders and CMOs and helping a founder or a CMO develop a strategy to build an organic audience that's going to turn into revenue, it's never a question. You have to say one sentence like, no, that's a little risky. And like, okay, cool, let's not do it. So really the only places these happen are in the independent site building world that I have found. There are occasionally, I think we've had one client who wanted to build a bunch of doorway pages or something wacky. We advised against it and we ended up parting ways because of it. And then, of course, Google slapped him. But most of the time nowadays, I'm talking to businesses who are concerned with risk reduction and want to build long-term assets instead of kind of like playing with fire. So used to have them a lot, but not much anymore.
It's so interesting to hear that because you're like this interesting, you've got a foot, it feels like in many different camps of the internet and who people kind of different goals going after different things, but obviously through the lens of, they need to rely on SEO and how they're using it. I like what you said about, it sounded like you're talking about like a foundation of honesty. Remember, there's other people on the end of it. Like you think you're grinding it out and making your affiliate or niche site and no problem at the end of the day, but there's always going to be a ripple effect, right? I don't know. I feel like enough people really think about that or talk about that at least going, yeah, something about that to me didn't feel right because I knew ethically it wasn't right or, someone might get hurt, which is, I think, worth talking about. I think one thing I did want to ask to you, because, we're talking about people sometimes doing the wrong thing and you did start talking some on like what the right thing looked like, but wanted to lay that out, for anyone listening to this going, well, great. I love the idea of white hat, but I'm curious to hear what you feel like are the core building blocks of white hat and, ultimately contributed to you moving up and forward with your sites.
Yeah, I don't think it's too difficult to be white hat, honestly. I think being black hat has become so tough. It's often more resource intensive and more labor intensive than it is to just do things right and build a good asset. But the core building blocks of White Hat, if I was going to distill it, or in its simplest form rather, is do everything with the user in mind and make link building mutually beneficial. So all of the content on your site should truly serve a user. If the user consumes that content and then takes an action based on your content, their life should be better, not worse. So if you're writing a product review, if you're compiling products, or if you're making a recommendation, or if you're educating somebody, their life when they leave should be a millimeter better rather than a millimeter worse. Link building is a little bit different because it's a sales process. So when you're building a link, the transaction is with someone else who owns a website. So you have to think about them and their users. What happens if a real person lands on that site and clicks a link and ends up on your site? Is their life going to be a millimeter better or a millimeter worse? And that's kind of a good basic judge. When you think about that, I think the White Hat stuff kind of rises to the top. So stuff like actual PR or stuff like really high quality guest posting where, you're writing content for a real audience that exists on a site. You're helping them enough to want to actually click on a link that is in the guest post. What does that look like? That's usually requires a lot of thought, requires some relationship building with an editor, requires thinking about their audience. But those are the things that are super long-term and that are typically rewarded over time. Of course, there's lots of other stuff like Skyscraper can be in there for sure if you build a great asset. Stuff like even resource pages, not to make this kind of a link building podcast because there are other people out there and agencies who do it better than me, but even stuff like resource pages, if you create a good resource for someone who is compiling resources for real audiences, real customers, that stuff is always White Hat. I really started thinking about it a lot when I was building the dog site because I had just gotten a dog. So I started building this dog site and I was answering questions about dog food, dog diseases. And I realized I would feel terrible if something happened to somebody's pet, right? So I was really trying to be accurate and do my research and become an expert. Likewise, when I was building links, I had so much fun with it because I was exchanging dog pics with other editors. And, it was a whole different vibe than sitting at my desk alone thinking, how can I get the next organic visitor? How can I eke out this next link from whoever will say yes? And that site did much, much, much better. And I think a lot of it was, of course, there's some luck and stuff. A lot of it was just because of the approach. And that's something I carry over into the agency.
That's awesome. It's cool to hear that, when you're working on Here Pup, just probably having a little bit more fun with it, a little bit more hard. And you got dog pictures. That's not a bad exchange. We're talking a lot about link building there. And I know you're saying we won't make it a whole link building podcast per se, but I did just want to make sure we touched upon what you felt like was the link building approach that gave you the greatest growth for your sites. Maybe was it something along the lines of that? Sounds like you were building relationships when you were exchanging those pictures and things like that, or maybe it's something else that I'm missing.
Yeah. So the thing that did the best was the thing that added the most value. And this is kind of one of the things that one of the mental frameworks that made me want to start an agency and kind of work with real businesses. I started to become more and more interested in this idea of value. Probably one of my first experiences with this was this link building asset I created for Here Pup that has since been copied ad infinitum or ad nauseum, one of the two. But it was an infographic about what your dog can and can't eat. Yes, my dog can eat this. No, my dog can't eat this. My dog can eat this in moderation, and this stuff is poisonous. And it was an infographic that you could look at a glance, pick out common foods and get an answer. I had that idea on my own, just came out of my own brain because I was having those questions as a new dog owner, created that infographic. And it was so easy to build links because it added actual value to the world. I could reach out to people and say hey, do you want to put this on your site? I can write a little blurb for it. So I was using Brian Dean's Guestographic basic formula, and it was really, really easy. It was not nearly as easy with other infographics that I would create later because I didn't add much value. So the tactics that I was having the most fun with and that worked the best was me brainstorming, how do I help people? And then trying to spread that around. Likewise, when I was doing some guest posting, the conversation was much less, can I have a link? And much more, hey, you're the editor at XYZ. What do you need right now? I feel like I can help you. What can I take off your plate? Is there anything that I could get you this week that would make your job a little bit easier. And if you're having those kinds of conversations, one, it's more fun. Two, you make more friends. Three, you're helping people. And then four, you get more links. So that's kind of my basic approach. A lot of that's not scalable. And, the people who can go out there and build scaled links are probably doing stuff a little bit differently. But for me with that site, those are the sorts of things that I was finding.
I mean, as somebody who receives a lot of emails like that, just hearing your approach, I'm like, yes, thank you. Thank you for trying to add value to the people that you were, hoping to get a link from. That infographic also sounds really cool. I'm thinking of our first dog who managed to eat like a rubber glove and a whole Bonanza of chocolate and survive somehow.
Wow. Yeah.
You should not let your dog eat those things, but
yeah, rubber gloves.
Rubber gloves shouldn't do it. Yeah, you don't want to see what that looks like on the other end. This current dog we have is super sensitive. So, and if anything, I feel like I need to look at that infographic and make sure I'm seeing what work with her because she's not a machine like the last dog. That's awesome, Perrin. It's so cool to hear about your journey, like your approach, especially. I think it's really special getting your mindset and what you were doing. I did want to switch gears because I know we're talking a lot about how you're building sites, links, etc. But I feel like maybe something you don't get to talk about as often are like your exits, which, hey, obviously fits what we're doing over at Empire Flippers. So I wanted to get into that. So I understand that you've built and sold 4 websites of your own. I was wondering your process for that. Do you kind of have an idea of when there's a good time to exit or what's your roadmap for that?
So built 5, sold 4. In total, probably not the biggest exits your audience has seen, but probably like $500,000 worth of exits altogether. One big one that was done in stages where I exited 70%, kept 30, let the new owners grow it, and then exited again later, or exited that remaining 30%. So really, I've always thought that the best place to exit is when you've got a buyer. Which is something Empire Flippers makes really easy. And, the whole site buying and selling thing was much younger when I started selling websites. And, this might be a faux pas, but I've never actually gone through a service. And I think that's a luxury for me. People kind of know me and follow me and will ask me what I'm doing, what I'm building. And so I've been approached quite a bit. And when there's a buyer, I can just ask myself, okay, do I want to let this go? I tend to like to graduate from things also. I think for any site builder, there is a personality aspect, any site buyer or seller, there's a personality aspect. A lot of people like to build and hold or buy and hold. I like to build and sell. So I'm really not squeamish selling a site when it's younger and letting somebody else grow it and scale it. A lot of times I just feel like I'm done with the project. I'm not interested anymore. And I enjoy that feeling of graduation. Getting a nice check and then kind of letting it go. The biggest one for sure was HerePup. That was the one that was most difficult to let go of because there was a lot more heart and soul in that than with other sites that I've built. I took the same approach with lots of the other sites. How do I add value? How do I make people's lives better? But with HerePup, it was my first build after, getting slapped so hard by Google. And it was about dogs, and I had just gotten a dog, and my dog's picture was on the site, and it was a mission I believed in and that kind of thing. So that one was a little bit emotional, but I also wanted to graduate, and I hadn't worked on it in a few months. And I also had $100,000 in student loans that I was eager to pay off. So there was some personal stuff there. But for the most part, I would say, there's no right or wrong time to sell. It just kind of depends on where you are and what buyers are looking for. I've sold to everybody from private equity, independent site builders, and also I've sold to brokers who are buying and selling for other businesses who are trying to grow through acquisition. So there are lots of different types of buyers. If I was going to kind of wrap it up in a lesson, I would say, even if you're building a niche site, don't assume that the buyer is going to be a niche site builder. Of course, if we're on great marketplaces like Empire Flippers, there are going to be lots of people like us on there, but there are also lots of people who can buy assets that generate organic traffic. And a lot of times, if those are businesses, they want to see something a little bit different. So if you're building a niche site and you're thinking about possibly exiting one day, you can do all the same kinds of stuff, write affiliate-based content, write about products, write about pain points, solve problems. I think maybe a lesson here is if you plan to exit, you can polish it and kind of think about all of the different personas of buyers. And then, of course, marketplaces make it way more easier to manage than I've had to do kind of just like privately.
Yeah, I think that's a fantastic point. We always try to preach on that, like at least sort of tying things up with the business and understanding, like definitely want to get a good buyer in, but they might not have the same skills and experiences. So what can you do to pass it off like super cleanly? I guess that ties into my next question, because you were saying you are building to sell, not building to hold. And so I think to do that, you usually have to, you're almost like building while forming your exit strategy. I guess that's what I hear from some people. And so I was wondering is when you're kind of building a business and you want to graduate from it, are you exit planning? Are you doing certain things throughout, say, 2 to 3 years of ownership? So it's almost like check marks. Okay, this is going to work for a buyer down the road. Or maybe not. Like you were saying that you get there and you're waiting for that interested buyer. Maybe it's just a little bit more like that comes together at the buying phase. Yeah, you tell me.
Yeah, I mean, the first few were messy. And I think it's important to make a distinction here between like graduating from websites and building real businesses like an agency. Because the agency I do want to hold. I mean, I've built a team there and I have, lots of great clients and stuff. Websites as assets are easy to hand off in terms of like what it takes to buy and sell a business. It's much less complicated than say like selling a SaaS company or something that's making the same amount of money. Just because typically for websites, we might have a few freelancers, at most one employee or something, but it's largely passive. So the most important thing to get in line with a website that you want to sell, for sure, the finances. So like that was the biggest mistake I made with the first site is like I had no record of the finances or all the affiliate accounts, where the money was coming from. It wasn't set up as its own company. So I had to like detangle it from my personal finances. And that was really difficult. So I would say, if you are going to build a website to sell, you should isolate it as much as possible and set up all of the bookkeeping and stuff so that it's all there from the beginning. I don't know who else has said that on the podcast. Somebody else has had to for sure, because it's like, you only learn that lesson once and you're like, oh man, that is 2 months of my life that I'm never going to get back, because it takes so much time to do it retrospectively. So, sites are mostly passive. The most difficult part of selling a website is almost always understanding the financial picture and the financial history. And that stuff you can kind of nip in the bud.
Yeah, it's so funny how people can feel like they're smooth sailing with their sites for so long until it comes to that point of, I've got to exit and I've got to track down those expenses. And like really, I felt like I was making money. I didn't really need to look at the fine details. It's like, no, you need to look at the fine details now. We're getting into this. It gives me shivers because I think of like how I feel every tax season. I'm like, oh, I've got to look at stuff. Obviously, this is being much more important. And, there's a lot of money on the line. So you have to get it right and so on and so forth. So I think that's solid advice. Again, it really is. It's amazing how people can cruise through and be like, oh, I've got to face myself in an exit.
Yeah, of course. And like, especially for like maybe some younger site builders like I was, if you are talking to buyers who are real businesses who are looking to buy like business assets, they're going to ask you a bunch of business questions. What's your EBITDA? And, like 25-year-old parents like, what the hell is EBITDA? And I'm like frantically Googling. So like having all that stuff wrapped up can also broaden your potential like base of sellers.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. We're talking about your SEO agency, and obviously it's a different story. You're more in that. You want to hold it. I'm curious to hear about that move away from, building sites the way you were to opening your own agency. Like, what was that move like? And I don't know, I guess, what have you learned from that transition?
First, I just tired of building affiliate sites, like it started to feel formulaic. There's only so many times you can enter a niche and be like, okay, what are the products? What are the best ones? How do I compare these things? And then also write some informational content. It just started to feel like something I had done before. Not to say it's not exciting. And in particular, I have lots of friends who have affiliate sites who are like in their primary hobby focus, like an area where they're super hyper interested and they have so much fun building sites. But I was a little bit tired of it and I wanted to put more chips on the table. I wanted to play with bigger stakes, and I wanted to start applying the stuff I had learned as an independent site builder to real businesses. there's a very steep learning curve to doing that. And because of that, I started learning doing some stuff for free, doing like work for free and helping friends for free and helping other founders for free. And then we eventually started scaling up an agency. And now we're in a place where we have incredible systems and a great team, and we've helped a lot of businesses in a lot of spaces. But at first, it was me kind of being bored with affiliate site building. And also, I met this guy, Jordan, who would end up being my co-founder. We actually met doing jiu-jitsu of all things. So he's like choking me unconscious one day. And he's like, what do you do for a living? And I'm like, I do SEO. He's like, oh, me too. I'm like, okay, well, everybody's an SEO. Like, what's new, right? But we had coffee in it. I mean, he was like super smart and really understood SEO, and he was working at an agency. And if you have been an independent site builder for your whole life, talking to someone who's been doing like high-level technical SEO at an agency, working with very complex like e-commerce sites in like huge spaces with, managing hundreds of thousands of URLs or whatever, it's like a totally different conversation. And if you're someone who likes to geek out about SEO, it can be fascinating. So I was like talking to my co-founder, Jordan, and I was just like, totally fascinated. And he didn't like his job. I didn't like my current day gig, even though I was, buying and selling sites. And I was like, why don't we just start an agency? He's like, do you think it can work? And of course, the stats on agencies are like super rough. I mean, it's something like 90% of agencies fail or something. So we didn't even know if it could realistically work. We had no idea how to get clients or like what those systems look like. But essentially just said, yeah, whatever, let's try. In first month, we made $0. Second month, we made $2,500. That was in September, October. By December, we were making enough to have replaced our salaries. And then it kind of grew from there. And of course, there was like a pandemic, and growing an agency isn't smooth. It's a difficult process. And we had to learn a bunch of business stuff. How do we hire people? How do we train people? How do we manage SOPs? How do we work on 15 sites at a time and still make sure everybody grows? But it's been super duper fun. I really enjoy it. It's been a very enjoyable and rewarding learning experience as far as like, how do we take these basic ideas that I started understanding as an independent site builder and build systems that can help a company who's doing $30 million in revenue and track that and understand the business problems and apply SEO to those problems. So it's definitely a different league, definitely different problems, a lot more businessy than working on a site by yourself at night, which is how lots of us start. But super fun, very interesting, very rewarding. And we've been able to work with tons of really cool companies, which is something I like. I like learning about different businesses. One of the things I realized about myself as I transition from like building single sites into running an agency, what I really like is business. I like business problems. I like adding value. I like thinking about value, and I like helping other people grow their businesses. What I happen to know is SEO, and what I'm good at is SEO. And so, yeah, we've been alive for like 4 years now and probably won't stop anytime soon.
What's cool about what you're just saying is like, I know you're good at SEO, I know you're good at writing, but then like through that journey, you all of a sudden you discover that you have something else that you love that you didn't realize, which is solving some of these business problems. And all of a sudden you've opened up what sounds like a new chapter for growth and a new chapter for just experiences and opportunities. I guess I say that because I think we all get so married down to like, I'm good at X, and therefore I'm just going to like really hammer that home and like, that's my life. But it sounds like your journey bouncing around between, I wouldn't say bouncing around. It's like you graduated the way you approach your sites. It's like you're graduating from one thing to another, and you've leveled up to this place of like, I'm leveraging SEO into like an entirely different new passion of mine. And I think that's so cool. I don't know if that resonates. Do you feel like SEO in a way has just kind of opened up kind of doors for you? Like, who do you think you'd be had you not stumbled into this world of SEO?
Yeah, that's a really great question. Was coming off of a poetry degree, and that was like before I got my consulting gig. So I'm sure I'd be trying to do like some weird artistic something or other. But what I say to the people closest to me is that business has become my creative outlet. Questions in my personal life, so you write any poems, or like, you work on anything artsy? I'm like, honestly, like, it sounds strange and it sounds a little bit nerdy, but business is my creative outlet, because especially when you're running an agency and you've got a portfolio of clients who all have different businesses, all have different products, all have different audiences. Waking up and solving those problems can be a creative process. But also, by the way, having learned so many more things about businesses, how business runs, and thinking about SEO in terms of like, let's build an audience instead of organic users converting to affiliate dollars, has made it much more interesting for us to build sites again. So as a company, we have our own sites that we are building and applying our systems to. And that's always really exciting because it gives the team a little bit of a break and gives us something fun to work on. But I would say a lesson that I learned that I would maybe hope to pass on to the independent site builders is that some of the best, most creative SEOs. So I've talked to so many CMOs. I've seen so many SEOs who are working in these big companies that I'm working on. The most creative, the best SEOs I've ever met have been affiliate marketers. And they're usually people with the most original ideas, the good ones anyway. You know, the people who float to the top are the people with the most original ideas, the people who are willing to take risk to solve a problem in a novel way. So if you're one of those people, it can be worth thinking about how you would apply that skill set to quote unquote real businesses. So we're building these sites as, you know, the agency has sites that it owns and builds, but they're not affiliate sites. They're businesses we are using SEO to grow, using the expertise of building an audience and then selling a product, whether that's software or a service or a physical good. So one way I think independent site builders can level up is to start taking on more business skills and using the skill that I think a lot of us undervalue in ourselves, which is the ability to bring people in the building to generate eyeballs and apply that to something like an e-commerce store, like a SaaS business, like a services business, or some other kind of consultancy. Build that audience and create something that's even bigger than an affiliate site. Affiliate sites always have their place. There are monster affiliate sites out there, and it's always a lot of fun. But you can do other stuff. You can do stuff that might be a little bit bigger. And of course, I really love doing that for businesses. So that's what we do when we talk to our clients. It's, you know, who are your customers and how do we bring them into the building?
I love that. Looking at everything you're doing, if you're in the affiliate space and it's like kind of bringing a level of expansion to that. Oh, I've really got what it takes to apply this to so many other things. I can grow businesses. I can do X, Y, and Z. It's not just like what I'm doing on my site right now. It's that next level. And I appreciate you extending the invitation to people who, you know, are probably in a similar camp to you, but may not see all the opportunities that you've been able to create for yourself and go, you know, I've got some really cool next steps I could be taking here. When I talk to somebody within SEO, I always love to ask them, maybe this is like a soapbox question about SEO. So I kind of get all of them to end most of like the interview mainly on their soapbox. So I'll extend it to you. I would love to know if you think there are some, let's say, common myths or misconceptions about SEO that people still believe to be true, or maybe there's some stuff that you don't like in the industry, and this is your chance to get on the soapbox and say, here's what I think, and here's what you should do or don't do.
Yeah, there are probably two things. One is to do everything with the user in mind. And if you have it in your heart to think about that person's life and how it's going to either improve or be worse after they leave whatever your asset is. I think it's a great frame for everything. It's going to help you produce better content. It's going to help you build better links. It's going to help you build better products. And it's going to help you talk to more of the right people. So that I think is probably a good framework that I would encourage everybody to adopt. And I say over time, you end up building better, cooler stuff that makes more money. So in my view, it is a win-win. As far as something like a little bit more specific and a little bit more tactical, I would say people should avoid bandwagoning. There's a strange thing that happens in SEO where like somebody figures out something cool, blogs about it, and then it gets pounded into the ground. One of the trends, because of course I have like other agency friends. My brother owns an amazing link building agency. I know lots of other friends, or I have a few other friends who own not only SEO agencies, but digital PR agencies, overall marketing firms. I have lots of friends in the space. One of the common denominators in the people who are doing the best work is that whatever the direction the bandwagon is going, they are going the opposite direction. So we have these tactics that kind of like ebb and flow. in SEO. Some of them are just always going to be bad, like PBNs or scholarship links or whatever. But a lot of stuff is just a bandwagon. Skyscraper was a huge bandwagon a couple of years ago, and it's been abused so much that it's hard to get links that way. The best link builders I know aren't doing that stuff. They're doing things that were popular 6 years ago, and they're just doing them in kind of a fresh way because nobody else is doing them. So if you're someone who's like reading blog posts, thinking something is cool and like applying it, maybe try something from 5 years ago, 6 years ago, and try to put a fresh take on it, because that's typically a much easier path to victory than trying to take whatever the most popular thing is, buying a course that makes it paint by number, and then just following the steps. It's a really tough way to succeed. The people who do the best in not just SEO, but marketing, because we kind of, from our vantage point as an agency, we work with lots of great marketing teams. Same thing for them. Whatever direction the bandwagon is going, they're usually a little bit offbeat, a little bit off cycle. So we can definitely apply that to SEO, not only with stuff like link building, but also with content. The Authority Hackers guys, Gail and Mark, who I'm still friends with, are great at finding those opportunities. The unfortunate part is they have such a big audience that anything they write about usually gets used pretty hard, but it's still a good lesson. And they are a good model for how to come up with creative ideas around content, around link building. And I think the last lesson just for SEOs specifically is that technical SEO is super underrated. Optimization of content is super underrated. People think it's kind of one and done and that's it. Our agency creates huge amounts of traffic for businesses only with technical and content optimization. So if you're not spending time on tech, you're not spending time optimizing content, definitely that's a good way to go. And probably the best place to start is logging into Ahrefs, SEMrush, whatever you're using, and looking at pages that are showing up on page 2, close to page 1, and focusing optimization and tech on those things.
That's a killer answer. That's a soapbox I can get behind. Yeah, when you're talking about the bandwagon thing, I really appreciate that, because I felt like, obviously I'm not deep in the space like you are, but I feel like there's a sense of maybe being a bystander to things going on in the space and feeling like I was seeing that amongst people in the industry. Like there is that bandwagon and, got to figure out, is the bandwagon actually the right approach? Is it going in the right direction? I think everything you've said throughout this episode about creative solutions, I would say like problems that everyone are facing, like it's really interesting to hear like how that just shift a little bit outside of the box seems to be what moves the needle. And if you're able to really get in that vein, like, that could be your secret sauce.
Or way outside the box,
Way outside. Let's go.
But yeah, just the willingness to be out there and to leave the bandwagon, I think is important.
Oh, well, this has been so much fun, Perrin.
We did it.
We've done it.
I'm shocked we got, yeah.
We're almost there. I don't want to jinx it now, Perrin. No, this has been so good, like that we've made it this far. This is a huge achievement for us. If I can, I'll give you the rapid fire questions that I usually give to everyone. I'd love to hear what your version is. So let's hit those home. So what would you say best hidden growth opportunities within SEO?
It depends on the site. If you've got a site that's been alive for a while, technical SEO and content optimization for sure.
Awesome. And tools or resources that can help people optimize their SEO?
I actually don't like any of the tools out there. Surfer, Market Muse, I don't like any of those. We do it manually, mostly because those tools ask you to be the same as everybody else. And what you should do instead is hit the major notes. Google wants you to hit those primary topics, but then try to be different and better.
Awesome. Okay. And final, and this might be the hardest question. What has been your funniest moment working in the world of SEO?
For sure, talking to just like all the people who own like weird like adult sites and stuff, like getting like the inbound leads that are just like, you look at the site and you have to like close it real quick because, you're in a cafe or something. Those are always fun. Talking to sketchy characters is always fun. I talked to a site where a guy was selling this just the other day, fossils. So he was selling like megalodon teeth for $3,000. Maybe not funny, but yeah, I would say more fun than funny for sure. Funny stuff is always the people, but yeah, don't have anything specific. But yeah, I guess maybe the funny thing is just me trying to like close porn sites and cafes because like people are trying to ask me to build links for them. Yeah.
And you're like, it is for work. It is for work. And like, obviously no one's going to believe you. I think saying that actually feels so relevant to virtually everyone in our industry. I think most people who come on the show cite some exposure to something inappropriate and like having to deal with that within the realm, whether it's Amazon or, affiliate, literally at our company. I think we're all at home with one another with the awkwardness of the internet. And then like everyone on the outside is like, what are you guys doing?
100%. 100%. Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much, Perrin. I'm just so pumped to have you on. And we did it. Now we can say we did it. We've gotten through the interview.
Finally did it.
And it was as great as I thought it would be. You're awesome. You bring such a fresh perspective and a really cool story. So I can't wait to see what our audience takes away from this. So thank you for offering so much today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. Thanks for listening. If you're still here at the hour mark, I've been quiet in this space. Really enjoy talking about this. And then, hey, next time you see Greg, give Greg a little hug for me.
I will. I hope I get to see Greg in the same country at some point. And if anyone wants to reach out to you, where can they find you, Perrin?
Yeah, we're over at rank.io, ranq.io. Kind of a story of like the cobbler's son has no shoes. So we don't have like super active blog. I have a couple of blog posts up there. But yeah, I'm also on LinkedIn and we can connect and chat. I'm on Clarity FM if you like need a, like serious advice or something. But yeah, rank.io or just hit me up on LinkedIn.
Awesome. Great. And we'll include links and some of that in the show notes as well for people to find you. Yeah, I'm excited to see what you guys get up to next. And who knows, may see you in the same country at some point.
Crossing our fingers.
Cool. Thanks again, Perrin. See you soon. Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. I hope you've walked away with a bit of new insight that'll help you in your digital entrepreneurship journey. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, please share it with others, post about it on social media, or leave a rating review. To learn more about businesses available for sale at Empire Flippers, click the link in the description or visit empireflippers.com/marketplace. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.